Hi, I'm Chuck Gibson. This is Taking Stock with Art Jarvis, a bi-weekly discussion of what is happening in the economy, the world of finance, and personal investment with Art Jarvis. Taking Stock with Art Jarvis is a presentation of Loveland Beacon in partnership with Jarvis Global Investments, LLC. Now here is Taking Stock. Welcome, Art Jarvis. Back at it again.
Episode 54.
Taking Stock, episode number 54. As we were talking offline, the second episode of the third season.
Amazing.
Just 2 weeks ago we said it's a whole new season.
Who would have thunk it?
Nobody gets to see this.
Right. That's a good thing. That's a good thing.
There may not have been a second season if they saw any of the first season.
There's a reason this is an audio show.
But anyway, we could. It seems like we always have a lot to talk about when it comes to what's going on in the economy globally, what's going on, locally, what's happening in the world of personal investments and things like that. So, here we are. It's Taking Stock, episode 54. Yeah. It's good to have you with us again.
Fantastic being here.
On this Tuesday, we're closing out July. Today is the 29th of July. We got 2 days left.
What happened to the summer?
Right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Teachers are going to be going back to school here pretty soon. Kids are going to be going back to school. Just.
Well, you know what? We could do a whole show on that, because why in the world are kids going back to school? Some kids are already back in school in different parts of this country. Mm-hmm. What?
They get them out before Memorial Day.
School starts the 1st of September, not in August.
Yeah, that's how it was for us. But then we went into June. Now they take them back earlier, and guess what? Then they're out by Memorial Day. So they don't go on Memorial Day weekend and then come back and take.
Well, they're out before Memorial Day.
They get the exams done before Memorial Day, but you said it here we do this every couple of weeks, and there's a reason we do it every couple of weeks. In my opinion, is if we do it once a month, things get stale. If we do it once a week, then probably a little bit too much. We still have something to talk about. I think every 2 weeks gives us a lot to talk about, but it's still relatively fresh. Unless there's some major event right after we did the prior episode.
Well, I find that our timing for recording Taking Stock, which again is every other Tuesday, unless something comes up. Sometimes we're a little bit off of that. But so here we are on Tuesday, July the 29th. And I found that in these, now into the third season, our timing seems to be slightly off. Because, what's the official day when a certain number is going to be reported? Yeah. Thursday, Wednesday, or the 1st of August, we're a couple days away from whatever the next report is. So we get to talk about it, speculate about what's coming. Right. And every once in a while we're right on. You and I were talking a little bit. We don't need to get deep into it, but here we are in Cincinnati. Yep. And it is the home of Procter & Gamble, and so they announced, their annual earnings or whatever, and they were up 2%. Was the announcement earlier today. The question mark, if we were going to speculate, is, that they're going to cut back. They're going to have some layoffs. Yeah. They're talking about 7,000, being laid off. But where, who, what? Yeah. And then divestiture because, they need to do some restructuring. And your comment was...
They do it all the time.
Right?
I mean, I shouldn't say all the time. That's not fair. But let's say they do it once every 10 years. And Procter & Gamble, I think, does have the if you're in the bottom 10%, you're out. Right.
Right.
They keep things pretty fresh there. They're looking for fresh sets of eyes. They're looking for new ideas and things like that. And then they go through their product line, and like you said, they look to divest the ones that aren't quite getting it done. But let's be clear. I mean, Procter & Gamble is not a big grower. Procter & Gamble is a consumer staples.
Right.
Right. It's Tide and it's toothpaste and things like that. It's no matter how bad things are going in the world, generally people still wash their clothes and people still brush their teeth and people still put on deodorant and things like that, right? So
that's it.
But at the same time,
their core business isn't going to change.
No, probably not. You know, they got rid of, let's say, like Jif peanut butter several years ago, right? So Jif disappeared. So they were in peanut butter. Apparently, peanut butter wasn't where it was at anymore, and they said packing. So, you know, it's just what they do. And you know, again, if you're one of the 7,000 people, you're not a happy camper. But I also would submit to you that if you had a relatively short career at Procter and Gamble, guess what? Your job opportunities probably aren't all that bad either. So
it seems to carry with it a certain amount. You know, prestige is probably a fair word. You know, a better word is, you know, it carries a little bit of you know, I lost the word, but it carries a little weight.
Sure, it does.
You know, it's you know what it is. It carries a good reputation.
Yeah.
You are a quality individual, for some reason. And you know I should have done a little research before this, just touching on Procter and Gamble as we are. How many years has there been Procter and Gamble?
Oh, jeez.
So
long time.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's 150 plus years.
Yeah, right.
You know, so because it seems like I remember them celebrating 150 years, and it might have been 50 years ago. But no,
ouch.
I wanted that. But the short version is, like you just said, if they go through these kind of, you know, cleaning house a little bit, and I don't mean, you know, getting rid of dead weight employees, but looking at their product lines and finding out what's moving, what's not, and how to keep that fresh and new. If they go through that every 10 years, well, you know, it's working.
Yeah.
They've been doing it.
They've done. You know, Procter & Gamble is not an easy place to get into. They have a very stringent selection process with a lot of personality testing, and, you know, to see if you're able to think on your feet and things like that. You know, a mere 40 years ago, you know, I may have come out of college and took a shot at Procter & Gamble, and it wasn't easy. But they were very nice and gave me a box full of parting gifts when the whole thing was done. So I got a little bit of peanut butter, and I got some, you know, bounce sheets and things like that. It was very nice of them. So yeah, I mean.
But you didn't get a cubicle or a corner office.
No, they didn't even put me in the closet. So you know, it's like I said, it was tough. But you know, it's interesting. I'm coming out of Xavier University, and I'm sitting there with a bunch of guys from like Wharton's and things like that, right? You know, so it's like, okay, I see how this is going. But yeah, no, but it was a good. It was definitely, as always, it was a good learning experience, though. You know, and it kind of. This is what Procter and Gamble's looking for from you. So, you know, when I do go find the job I'm looking for, I'm going to make sure I accentuate some of those things in the interview process. So, no, it was good.
Yeah, well, so, you know, and we're not going to dwell on it too much more, but you touched on, and it's a very clear message of what Procter and Gamble is, who they are, and, you know, what they do. So I'm just going to throw this in there for a little bit of fun. You mentioned again offline we were talking. You said, you know, they're not a technology company.
That's right.
So, could they be? Could Procter and Gamble all of a sudden begin to develop technology or a technology division?
Could they attempt to? Yes.
Right.
Should they? Probably not.
Well, you know, and that's fair. That's why I said we're not going to dwell on it. But you know, it's kind of a curiosity as the world's evolved and changed all around us, all around all of us, and around them too. They have held firm in their niche and done very well with it. So do they even ever have to think about that technological?
No, 100%. And I've actually been spending quite a bit of time on looking into artificial intelligence and things like that, and what that means, and where's that going to take us, and things like that. You know, if Procter & Gamble wants to remain cutting edge and wants to remain, you know, they want to do the best they can with the profits and things like that, then yeah, you know, the technology always has to be there, you know. So, you know, 150 years ago they're making soap. You know, that was pretty labor intensive, right?
Stirring it in a tub, right?
I'll bet you there's not 10% of the people on that line today that there was 100 years ago. So, yeah, so will do they have a technology department? You bet they do. Or is there going to be some significant changes coming down the pike? And guess what? Artificial intelligence is not going away, right? So that's going to make, we had the Industrial Revolution, you had the Internet, I'll call it a revolution, I'm not sure anyone's ever said that, and, really we're kind of getting into this artificial intelligence revolution, and, if you're a company, you better pay attention to where you are, or someone's going to go sprinting right past you.
Well, artificial intelligence is no longer the new frontier. It is the current frontier. So, and I guess the other side of that question in terms of P&G, and we're going to be done here with that, but they're not going to become the company that's developing, technology products for the consumer to purchase. They're going to keep their niche. But there's no question, and I think you just did a good job describing, technology's always been a part of Procter & Gamble, and will always be. It's not like they're going to fall behind technologically. But I just don't see them becoming the, they're not going to get in the cell phone wars with Apple and Google or Samsung or whoever else.
That's Amazon's job.
Yeah, the electronic technology that's not going to be the forte. It would be, not to say that P&G couldn't see a place down the road where they want to, buy one of those companies or become partners with one of those companies or something. But
there's I don't know if you're familiar with Fidelity back in the 80s. There was the Fidelity Magellan and the Magellan 2 fund at Fidelity. It was run by a gentleman named Peter Lynch, who was very successful. That would probably fall under what he would call diversification. Not diversification, but diversification, that these companies get into something that they really shouldn't be getting into, and they end up diversifying, but it ends up hurting them. So I'm a big fan of go with what you know, right? Now, take Amazon for an example. That's a technology firm. The things that they do, as a matter of fact, there was a special on TV not too long ago covering Amazon from spot A to spot Z and how it gets ordered and how it gets to your front door. And, it is an art, they're using artificial intelligence and every single delivery is pumped into these algorithms or whatever you call it to make them more, efficient, but also more flexible. If they're trying to deliver a package to your house and this route is always blocked up or something, the algorithms and things automatically find a different route that's more efficient. So but Procter & Gamble, and let's be clear, there's a whole lot of technology firms out there trying to create things to sell to Procter & Gamble to make their business better, right? So Procter & Gamble doesn't need to start to, and I can't necessarily say I know this for a fact these days, but not that long ago, Procter & Gamble hired subcontractors to do a whole lot of their technology and things like that. They didn't even have their own technology. They brought someone in to do this kind of things. So
100%. That's been a part of their strategy and operating procedure for years and years, without a doubt. And we'll say contract, but bringing other people in to do those things. Very interesting. There's a difference between being a technology user, which they clearly are, versus being a technology developer.
Sure.
And that's kind of the question: would we ever see them become that? And I don't. Certainly not the electronics world. But that's that's really staying at home for us today, Art.
Yeah, well,
we're just hanging out right here in Cincinnati.
There you go. There's a lot of great companies in Cincinnati, and there's a lot going on there. We could do weeks of shows on them, actually. But here's one interesting thing about artificial intelligence to me is there's this again Industrial Revolution and things like that, Internet, but there's this huge concern that blue collar workers are going to be losing their jobs en masse. Now, is artificial going to start taking over blue collar jobs? Yes. But honestly, I see it having, at least on the front end, having a much greater impact on the white collar. workers. You have pieces of software and things that where whatever the number is, you had 25 people in a human resources department. Now you have 5 people using the software that are able to do the work with 25.
Right.
So there's a whole lot more of that going on, with them using these things and systems that can think for themselves and stuff. I'd be more worried as a white collar worker than I'd be as a blue collar worker right now.
Yeah, well, the employment numbers we talk about with some frequency, so I guess we'll be watching those as AI becomes more and more prevalent throughout whatever, the business world, the industrial world, and everywhere that it's, so I'm media.
Mm-hmm.
And I started out in radio and television in the first place before I really focused on, the printed journalism business. Wow.
Yeah.
From the time, this is 41 years for me now.
Yeah.
And, so go back 41 years into, let's say, and again, I was here in Cincinnati. So let's go back 41 years into the television newsroom at Eyewitness 12 News with, Nick Clooney on the anchor desk, and, that included a guy named Walt Mayer on the sports desk with Denny Jansen, who lasted a long time beyond Channel 12 at Channel 9. But some name, Ira Joe Fisher was the weather guy. But go back those 41 years into that newsroom with those guys, and I'm remiss not to mention some of the other reporters and things that I was fortunate to be around and work with and to learn from back then. But that technology, we're talking about AI today. Well, 41 years ago, what that newsroom looked like, and the camera operators, and a teleprompter, which in those 40, Eyewitness 12 News was beginning to make those strides because it went from film at 11 on Al Shalakati News to now is instant video, because that electronic news gathering, Edge, Channel 12 had the Edge. Electronic data gathering, news gathering, whatever the Edge stood for.
Right.
But, so already, now you go into the newsroom now and you talk about the lost jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So in the media, robots.
Yeah.
In the automotive industry, they've already seen in the manufacturing plants, go back 20, 30 years ago, the robotics, so a different kind of form of artificial intelligence has already, the machining shops, computer operated machines. All of a sudden, like you said, there was those 25 guys. Well, all of a sudden they only need 5 because there's a computer program and they just punch it in and then the machines run and make the parts. And so this is just the continuing evolution of a new technology, an intelligence technology, so they're calling it. When I get a kick out of artificial intelligence, well, isn't it ultimately real intelligence, not artificial?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
We've had fake news, we had fake news, so we got fake intelligence. No, it's not fake, it's real.
Yeah. No, it's very real to us, let's put it that way. Yeah. No, you make some good points, and I think, this being an investment show, the trick, and if we're doing a portfolio, we're trying to design a portfolio for a certain individual based on their age and their time frame and liquidity needs and risk tolerances and things like that. But you need to be out there in some places with some investors. You need to kind of be out there figuring out, what's coming up, number one, but number two, where is it coming from?
Right.
Now, clearly, people have made the decision here that chip maker NVIDIA is a place to be. And we've talked a lot about that in the last year. That stock is up 50% in the last 12 months.
Ooh.
And it was already up some stupid amount before that, and then, you said, has it gone too far, too fast, and things like that. Well, guess what? It's up another 50%.
Yeah.
So apparently they're still around for a while. And, but yeah, it's, artificial, but it's, the things, it's kind of like computer chips in your appliances and things like that. It's just going to slowly work its way into your life. right?
Right.
And you talk about like ChatGPT and things like that. The more people use it, and especially as we go into the future, the more people use ChatGPT or whatever the equivalent is of that, that's collecting data on you. I could type something personal into ChatGPT 3 months ago, and I could go today and ask a question, and it will go back to that question or that information that I gave it 3 months ago. Like, it already knows that. I don't have to tell it again something about me. It remembers it from 3 months ago. And it's just, pretty soon, I'll make the comment that pretty soon ChatGPT may know you better than you know you, right? Somewhere down the road. And how will that be used? What companies are going to use that information? How are they going to use that information? How are they going to sell you things? How are they, how are they going to put things in front of you, or tease you or tempt you to go to this place or thing? There's a whole, and then maybe get into some kind of predictive kind of things.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's I've been having this conversation with people.
Well, the predictive, we see a lot of that just on our personal devices.
Mm-hmm.
You start to type a sentence and it's finished for you. You just hit that button and there,
That's right.
How are, and it says you doing,
Right, yeah.
before you can get how
But
are.
isn't it interesting that you do that? Let's say you live in California and you type in whatever it is, where should I go to dinner, or type something political in, and then you're going to get a different answer in California than I'm going to get in Ohio. Like you're going to
hopefully in terms of where to eat, because when it says, and we'll throw a free plug in here. So if I'm in Santa Barbara.
Mm-hmm.
Now, where's a good place for a steak? And it says Tony's.
Tony's, yeah.
That's a long trip from Santa Barbara.
But maybe worth it.
It would be. That's why I said we're going to throw a free plug in. I gotta find the best fare to get me here. But
it's I mean, we talked about things. I mean, look at like tow trucks and repossessing.
Wow.
Okay, so now you have automated cars. Do they go pick up the cars and repossess them, or do they just tell the car to drive itself to the bank? You know what I mean? And so it's just.
Well, I know one thing. That's going to be a whole different thing than opening your front door and seeing the tow truck driver hooking your car up. Yeah. A terrible thing to talk about. But to repossess your automobile, one thing, walk out. The other one is to open up your door and see your car driving itself away.
Right, yeah.
So,
what happened to your car? It drove itself to the bank.
Oh my gosh.
So, and again, there are things, I'm a rookie on this, right? I mean, there are people out there thinking about this all day, every day, and they're way, way higher level than I am, right? So, but it's and we'll give one more local plug.
Okay.
Kroger was on the cutting edge of collecting data on its customers, on its clients. I mean, you go back, whatever it is, 20-something years.
Longer than that.
Kroger was, you went in, and I went in there and bought a head of lettuce and a Mountain Dew. Guess what? The next thing you know, I'm getting coupons for produce and for pop, right? And they've been doing it for years, and that's one of the things I think that sets them ahead of many of their competitors.
At least 25 years.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's more than that. But and I can't think there's a company here in Cincinnati that is, they were like, we talked about P&G uses other companies to do certain things. So Kroger had this other company that was basically doing that data, getting that data, collecting that data, analyzing that data, and creating that whole situation that we're so all too familiar with. Right. What your little Kroger card or your UDF pump card, or we could go down the list. I'm glad you mentioned Kroger too. I was going to sort of sidestep it, but you talk about those algorithms, and I saw the one of the Kroger trucks out when I was out riding my bicycle yesterday evening, and saw one of the Kroger trucks, and it made a delivery well, the truck didn't. Whoever was driving it, so Kroger's had a delivery driver out, and they made delivery of groceries to a home. And then I saw them finishing up at the one place, and as I continued on riding, I saw them down the road, same person, making another delivery. And I thought, how did they figure that out? Yeah. And so there it is. I mean, there's that technology that it has to be some level of the AI that's saying, the most efficient way to deliver those. Of course, I also threw into the mix, just thinking about it while I was riding my bike, and said, well, what do they do when Chuck Gibson now calls his order in and they're already here? Like, well, they can't be that efficient because that truck's already it's got to leave.
Right.
Somebody else, another truck's going to have to come here. So they weren't able to just smoothly, okay, we got all this neighborhood's deliveries, boom. But it's amazing.
Well, there's 5 more trucks coming after that truck.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting, and it's going to be a conversation. Hopefully, we're having together for years. But you also made a point that about our timing. It is kind of interesting. So we do this on Tuesdays most of the time.
Right.
And normally the Fed they meet on Tuesday and Wednesday, but they make the decisions on Wednesday. So that is also true of today. The Fed's going to get together today, and tomorrow they're going to make some kind of announcement. And honestly, we'll see what the verbiage is, but there's about a 0 chance of them cutting rates tomorrow. Okay, so
even though there's somebody that told them they need to.
Oh yeah, repeatedly. And I disagree wholeheartedly. I really do. This economy is firing on all cylinders. We don't need to tap on the accelerator and go faster. We're doing fine. Okay. And we've got a whole bunch of news here in the last few days with tariffs. We got Japan locked down, or at least the beginning phases of it. We get the same thing with the European Union. We're getting China to the table. And then, the next thing, of course, is still Putin in Ukraine and things like that. So, he threw down the gauntlet and said, you got 12 days, and I think that was a day or two ago. So maybe he's got 10 days now. But the other thing tomorrow.
Until what?
Until he gives you another deadline. But who knows? There's a reason I don't work in Washington. But the other thing is so gross domestic product comes out tomorrow on Wednesday.
Right.
So the interesting thing is we went through the whole recession thing in the end of February, March, and April, and the markets dropped 20% because tariffs were going to ruin the economy and everybody was going to lose their jobs and we were going to heat up inflation. None of which has happened, by the way. And that we're looking tomorrow. The early estimate for gross domestic product for the second quarter is positive 2.5%. Okay, and that comes on the tail of the first quarter that was down 0.5%. But I think the interesting thing worth mentioning is everyone was worried about tariffs in the first quarter, so people were importing things to the United States like crazy just to try and get ahead of those tariffs. Well, if you have more imports than you do exports, that has a negative impact on your gross domestic product. So really, that was kind of maybe a one-time thing, kind of a little bit of an aberration.
What we like to say, that's a one-off.
A one-off. There you go. It's a one-off. So the whole recession thing, once again, it's not even, in my opinion, at this time, is not even a topic. But yeah, you're right about the timing thing. So if something surprising happens tomorrow, we might not talk about it for 2 weeks, or we do a special.
I will look for a couple of text messages from Art Jarvis tomorrow. Because as news breaks, I can tell the listeners right now, Art is always on top of it. I get a text message that says this is happening. And then, Loveland Beacon can then make a decision to throw in an extra story, or maybe you never know if you might get one of those quick 10-minute special reports with Art Jarvis, and he gets a call. But it depends on how. Everything is breaking news today,
right?
And I try to stay away from that.
And sometimes it's even correct.
That's what I'm saying. Everything is breaking news. That's a bunch of hooey.
Yeah.
What's breaking right now?
We're out of time.
We're about 2 minutes. Okay. Well, actually, about a minute and a half. But I wanted to open the door a little bit on that on the European Union tariff agreement that came to pass over the weekend. Which has been called a great big deal by our president and also by them, the European Union leadership said this was a great big deal, a lot of tough negotiations, I think they were quoted as saying. And so what's your take on that coming to pass? I mean, it's like, are the dominoes falling in terms of the tariff thing?
100%, and they're falling in our favor. Okay, now from an economic standpoint, from a financial standpoint, our relationships with other countries, I'm not smart enough to give you that answer. I did do a bit of traveling in Europe this summer, and the average person in Europe is not happy with the current administration, So, but yeah, I think, and we made the comment in a couple episodes that, this doesn't have to, if we end up just a little bit better off in the United States and we create some more jobs and we're not giving the farm away and things like that, we end up better off. Now, we can argue about whether it was approached from the right, way or not, but the point is, we're getting deals with other countries and things like that, and it's coming out in our favor, even if it's a little bit better, right? So, and that's where we are.
Yeah.
So,
well, you know what, and I don't usually try to battle you too much because I don't know what I'm talking about. Right. However, it seems to me that this criticism of we're being too harsh and maybe, the other, like you said, you did a little travel and they're not so happy with this administration. It seems to me that Trump is really sitting down at the negotiation tables. Not Trump, but Trump's administration and the people that are out there and talking, and ultimately Donald Trump himself when he goes forward and sits down with, the leaders of these other nations. It seems to me, correct me if you think I'm wrong, or battle me if you think I'm wrong, he's trying to make deals that are good for them and us.
I do believe that.
I think he's, and I don't know if I'll say if he's trying to make deals that are good for, our, economic partners, whatever. That's ultimately what they are. They're economic partners, right? So he's trying to make deals that are fair for both sides, and it has been out of balance, totally unfair, as I understand it, to the U.S. economy for decades, and
easily 3 decades.
Well, what's interesting? How often do you hear Donald Trump say, "I didn't do something"? Mm-hmm. And he has said during this whole thing, and he said, "During my first term, we didn't do anything then either." Yeah. Admitting, sure. I can rip the administration that just left office, and I can rip the administration before I was in my first term. But guess what? I didn't do anything about it either, and it's time we do.
Yeah. Good, bad, or indifferent, he's come into this term with a complete different mindset.
Yeah.
He said, but I guess I kind of come at it with a little kinder, gentler. That okay, let's come to the negotiation table. Let's have a discussion. Let's figure some things out. And if that's not working, or you're ignoring me, or laughing at me or making fun of me, then okay, then maybe now we get a little harsher.
Well, now that's what I say. It's going to be 50%.
Right. He ripped the Band-Aid off on day one.
Right.
Okay. He's like, this is what we're going to, but he kept adjusting. Right. A lot of those things that were announced that we freaked out about never came to fruition. Right. He gave them an extra 30 days. He gave them an extra 90 days after. Again, I'm not a master negotiator, but it got them to the table. And once you got them to the table and have an honest discussion and try and figure things out, I'm for that.
Yeah.
Okay? So, yeah. So, and based on where the general consensus was that where we thought we were going to be back in the end of February or March, we're way better off now than what we were back then from a financial and an economic standpoint.
All right. Well, we'd be remiss if we closed the show without Sam. So how's the S&P 500 on this Tuesday, July 29th?
It's interesting enough. We were looking for 6,300, I think, 2 weeks ago, and we actually hit 6,400 on the S&P yesterday. We hit 6,401. We pulled back and closed below it. Today we hit 6,409, and I think we've actually pulled back a little bit again, but we're in the high 6390s right now. So it's still plugging along. We're up 33% on the S&P 500 from the bottom in in April.
Right.
The only thing, and I'll be quiet, I'll make the one point, is the really nice thing about this compared to other discussions we had is this has been a much more broad-based move up than what we saw last year, which is great for the portfolios. Yeah.
Well, and on that good news note, hopefully we'll continue to trend upward, not just in the S&P 500, but overall economically and global. The global mission goes beyond economy. It goes to let's settle some wars. Let's settle some differences and bring a little more peace around the world. So, but on that positive note, Art Jarvis, I thank you once again for being here for Taking Stock episode 54. Thank you so much.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thank you. Appreciate you.
And we'll be back for Taking Stock episode 55 in 2 weeks. Thank you, listeners, for joining us today. Thanks for joining us for this edition of Taking Stock with Art Jarvis. Join us again in 2 weeks for our next edition. Taking Stock with Art Jarvis is a presentation of Loveland Beacon in partnership with Jarvis Global Investments, LLC. Jarvis Global Investments, LLC is a registered investment advisory firm. The advisor is not attempting to furnish personalized investment advice or services during this production. Individuals should fully investigate the appropriateness of any investment before investing. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. Investments may lose value.